The Three Davids, from Renaissance to Baroque. Humanism is one of the foundational ideas of Western culture. With the idea that human experience is the center of the cosmos, we as humans gain power over ourselves and our own fate. With power comes responsibility. For the Renaissance, it was the responsibility of the individual to make the most of their talents, to present them to society as gifts and civic duty. The return for successfully developing talent and genius was fame and fortune. Social positions was no longer merely a matter of birth. One could now be a self-made man. As culture changed and reevaluated and interpreted this basic idea, these new understandings of the human condition and human position in the cosmos were reflected in art. To illustrate these changes, we will look at three objects of the same subject: the motif of David, symbol of Florence. At the dawn of the Renaissance, Milan was a huge powerhouse of industry and wealth, whereas Florence was a small cultural center, but one with an important resource: gold. Milan thus endeavored to conquer their smaller neighbor. However, it was the Florentines who were victorious, successfully fending off Milanese invasion and thus maintaining independent sovereignty. This was likened to the biblical story of David defeating Goliath, 1 Samuel 17. Thus, David becomes the symbol of Florence, used by the ruling family, the Medici, as a statement of power, authority, and victory. The David by Donatello, circa 1430 bronze, was a key early image of Florentine power and Florentine ideas of humanism. The early Renaissance tended to emphasize the idea of human victory, the human as the conqueror of the earth and of destiny. Thus we see here the victorious David wearing the helmet of Florence, standing on the head of the slain Goliath wearing the helmet of Milan. By showing the end of the narrative, the entire tale is implied, but it is the victory of the thoughtful David that is emphasized. There is a calm to the figure, a sense of line and carefully designed form that also marks the early Renaissance. Also, the entire composition is self-contained. The young David looks down upon the head, his sword brings the eye back in and down, and no other space around the statue is being engaged. In contrast, we can look at Michelangelo's version of David, created around 1503 of marble. We find ourselves at the very different point of the story. David has a slingshot over one shoulder and looks out at an implied Goliath in the distance, gauging his enemy at the beginning of the tale. The High Renaissance, which produced this new vision of David, was interested not in human victory, but in human potential. The action has not yet occurred. We all know what the outcome will be, but here we glimpse the dramatic moment just before the action, a breath before the storm, so to speak. This David is starting to open the composition to space beyond, with the gaze of David fixed into some other point in space. The Baroque takes yet another interpretation of humanism, evident in Bernini's David of 1623 marble. A century after Donatello's tour de force of contemplative victory, we see a mature David in the very act of throwing the stone that will kill his opponent. We have the entire narrative illustrated not as the beginning or the end, but at the climax of the action, in the midst of the drama unfolding. It is human action that takes center stage, the glory of motion, decision, the actual doing of deeds, which is understood as what makes the human experience great. This is the world in the midst of the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, awash with the debate of salvation by deed and salvation by faith. The composition completely opens up by the serpentine line of the turning body, and there's a determination to the gaze, a gaze that is directed not upon some vague Goliath over there, but when you're in the correct position, looks directly at you in the place of Goliath. The space around the figure is engaged, the motion more prominent than the line. This is a Baroque piece, where the drama and emotion of the figure are paramount, as opposed to the Renaissance interest in line and logic. Baroque art tends to be more dramatic, use light to heighten that drama, and manifest a sense of immediacy rather than the more aloof forms of the Renaissance.